Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings Benny's Bats video for Monday, June 27th. We got a nice 10-game slate on tap for tonight with all the games starting, after 7 o'clock. So those are the games that we're going to be concentrating on. What we like to do here in the Benny's Bats section is we take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound, figure out what their weakness is, and then try to figure out which bat's profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top. The first game we have is the New York Mets going up against the Washington Nationals today. Noah Syndergaard on the mound for the Mets. Right-handed bats hitting only about 200 against him this year. Left-handed bats hitting 268. So if you do decide you want to attack them, the left-handed bats are definitely going to be the way to go. Looking at that Washington team, I mean, that pretty much has two guys that kind of stand out for you. You got Bryce Harper with his, 400-plus WOBA, 300-plus ISO score. Easily the best bat that you want to take to, go up against Syndergaard if you're going to take anybody. Daniel Murphy's been struggling a little bit lately. He's the other big left-handed bat they have. Besides him, I mean, you're looking at guys like maybe Clint Robinson if he gets in there, or, Ben Revere. But honestly, I mean, Syndergaard's been very good this year. He's averaging over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. Really low whip, really low ERA. Not really a guy who I expect to get lit up today. So probably not looking at any of the Washington bats, to be honest with you. On the other side of this game, we have Joe Ross. Joe Ross is basically lights out to right-handed bats. I mean, the batting average the last 2 years to right-handed batters is like below 190. I mean, he has just been almost unhittable for right-handed bats. Left-handed bats, though, are hitting almost 300 against them. So you can definitely look to go after him with some of the lefties. The problem is right now, I mean, the Mets sent Conforto down, so that's one less lefty that's in the lineup. You're really looking at like Curtis Granderson at the top of the order and Neil Walker somewhere in the middle of the order as the only two left-handed bats that I'm really looking to put into my lineup. I like both of those guys. They both hit right-handed pitching well. And like we said, with Joe Ross really struggling with those left-handed bats, if I'm taking anybody on the Mets today, it's probably going to be Granderson and Walker. Next game we can talk about, we got Texas going up against the New York Yankees. Ivan Nova's on the mound for the Yankees. Left-handed bats usually are the ones that do better against them. But this year, left-handed bats actually have a lower average with right-handed bats kind of knocking them around. It's not usually what we see out of Nova, so I do think it regresses back to the mean. I still want to take the left-handed bats against them. Guys like Shin-Soo Choo are in a pretty good spot here. He's leading off on the top of that order for Texas. He's been, he's a guy that has a little bit of speed, a little bit of power. He's been putting up some pretty decent numbers, and his price still isn't elite. I mean, if you remember when this guy was healthy, he was one of the elite options in the $45,000 to $5,000 range on most nights. He's more in like the $3,500 to $4,500 range, depending on matchup now. So I think it's good to take advantage of Chu and kind of throw him into your lineups. Also really like Nomar Mazara. It seems that the, algorithms always have this guy a little bit cheap. Probably another one of my favorite left-handed bats on this Texas team. And then, I mean, even Prince Fielder is starting to hit the ball. He had a home run yesterday, had a couple hits. So, Fielder could be another one of those left-handed bats to look at. You get a very low fly ball rate and also a low amount of strikeouts with Nova. So I'm not really too worried about any of these guys striking out. I think that, the guys that I like would be more along the lines of Chu and Mazara, who can get some hits and steal some bases and score some runs and do some things on the base paths. Because, like I said, Nova's not a guy that gives up a ton of home runs. On the other side of this game, we have Chichi Gonzalez. And Chichi Gonzalez is making his first major league start. He really hasn't been all that great down at AAA, so I think the Yankees can get to him. At the same point in time, I mean, the Yankees looked really bad, almost getting, I think Tyler Duffy took a perfect game into about the 7th inning before Aaron Hicks hit a single off him, and he had a shutout going into the 8th inning until Mark Teixeira hit a solo home run. But really, this Yankee team is not hitting the ball well. So Chichi is a right-handed pitcher. You get all these left-handed bats in Yankee Stadium. Beltran, probably my favorite, 360 WOBA, 218 ISO for him. I guess you can look at guys like Ellsbury and Gardner and McCann and even Teixeira now. But I got to be honest, I'm not in love with this Yankees offense, and I am a Yankees fan. So coming from me, if I'm not in love with them and I, I'm still a little wary of using them, I think you guys should definitely be careful about it as well. Next game we can talk about, we got Boston at Tampa Bay. Eduardo Rodriguez on the mound for Boston. Now, if you remember, this guy was pretty much one of their stud prospects last year. He's making, I think, his 4th or 5th start coming off the DL right now. Hasn't been anywhere near as good so far in 2016. And the big reason is, right-handed bats are really killing him this year. Last year, they didn't hit him well at all. This year, they're absolutely killing him. And this Tampa Bay team actually hits left-handed pitching really well. Logan Forsythe leading off, 414 WOBA, 300 ISO score. So he is easily one of my favorite second base options today. Evan Longoria, 390 WOBA, 221 ISO score for him. So he hits lefties, very well. With guys like Steven Souza and Pierce both hurt, the lineup against lefties is not as robust or as long as it had been when they had all these righties they could throw in there. You're probably going to see a couple guys like Logan Morrison and maybe Miller and, Corey Dickerson. I mean, they're just running out of healthy bodies. So I think these guys are all going to play. So you're not going to have 6 or 7 right-handed bats like we normally do. But the right-handed bats that are in for Tampa Bay, I think, are in a pretty good spot. On the other side of this game, Tampa Bay has Blake Snell, the lefty. He's one of their big prospects that's going to be going up. Right-handed bats tend to do better against him, but he is a ground ball pitcher, so I'm not really looking for a ton of home runs here. I mean, this Boston offense is really solid, though. Xander Bogaerts has been just destroying left-handed pitching, so 399 WOBA for him, definitely somebody I think is in play. I also think you can look at guys like Mookie Betts and Dustin Pedroia on top of the order. Hanley Ramirez is starting to heat up. He's hitting, absolute rockets just about every time he's up there at the plate. So he's another right-handed bat I think we can take a look at. The right-handed bats would be the way I try to attack this kid. So, like I said, my favorite is probably Bogaerts, but guys like Hanley and Betts and Pedroia are also going to be in play for me. Next game, we talk about Chicago Cubs against the Cincinnati Reds. Jake Arrieta's on the mound. And I mean, Arrieta's still a stud, but he hasn't been a fantasy stud lately. He's been walking a few too many guys. By walking a few too many guys, he's not pitching as deep into the games as he normally does. So without pitching as deep into the games, his strikeouts are down a little bit. His innings pitched are down a little bit, which means that, those things being two of the, big things that you put into big components of an overall fantasy score, his fantasy score is down a little bit and his price is jacked up to the ceiling. I mean, I think he's almost $14,000 on DraftKings today, like 13.7 or something like that. You can't get a pedestrian game out of him and still have him pay off value. At that price, you really need him to go big. Like I said, he's not really getting hit. He's not giving up a lot of runs. But if he's only going 6 innings pitched, he's probably only getting 6 or 7 strikeouts and is probably not returning value. Now, with that being said, he did throw a no-hitter against the Cincinnati team the last time that he faced them. So he's obviously in a pretty good matchup. The Cincinnati team does not profile to do well against them. And I mean, Arrieta's still a stud pitcher. So I'm not going to argue with anybody who wants to roll him out there. I just don't know if he's going to be worth that 13.7 price tag, but I'm definitely not taking any bats against them. On the other side of this game, we got Dan Straley, the righty. And left-handed bats have been better, but he's actually been pretty tough on both righties and lefties as a starter. I think that there's enough power in this Chicago order. And I also think that, Straley's a guy who only goes 5 or 6 innings. So they're going to get 3 or 4 innings or 2, probably 2 at-bats against the bullpen of the Reds. And the Reds bullpen is easily one of the worst in baseball. So maybe they don't get a lot out of them early, but they're definitely going to wind up getting their runs in this game. I'm not too worried about that. Anthony Rizzo in righty on lefty situations, the best bat that the Cubs have. 398 WOBA for him, 269 ISO. He's definitely in play. Chris Bryant, 375 WOBA, 219 ISO, even in a righty on righty matchup, he's in play. And then Wilson Contreras, the young catcher that they moved up. This kid's been hitting in the cleanup spot and he's been producing. So as long as his price still remains a little bit low, he's another guy that I think we really have to consider in any game that we're playing here with the Chicago team. And like I said, Straley's been okay. He can give up a couple runs and a few hits. But I definitely think the bullpen will give up more once they get in there as well. So if I'm the Cubs, I'm trying to get Straley out of this game. Who, like I said, Straley's been solid. He's been a pretty decent pitcher. But the sooner they get him out of the game, the more at-bats they're going to get against the bullpen. And the at-bats they get against the bullpen, I think, are going to be high-quality at-bats. So if you wanted to stack up this Cubs team and use a whole bunch of these guys, you're not going to get an argument from me. Next game we can talk about, we got Cleveland going up against Atlanta. Trevor Bauer on the mound, and he's actually a little bit of a reverse splits guy. Right-handed bats are a tad better. He does have a high fly ball rate, but he hasn't given up hasn't given up a ton of home runs this year. And I don't really think that matters against Atlanta because Atlanta doesn't have a team outside of Freddie Freeman. They don't really have any guys that put the ball in the air and have that home run power. This Atlanta offense is not great, even though they are better with all those left-handed bats against right-handed pitching. I still think Bauer's in a pretty good spot here. Like I said, Freeman is the one guy that I would worry about a little bit. 374 WOBA for him, 229 ISO against right-handed pitching. Bauer is prone to giving up the home run. Freeman does have some home run pop in his bat, so he's probably the best bet overall that I would be looking for. On the other side of this game, we got the young John Grant, right-handed pitcher. Left-handed bat's doing much better against him. So a guy like Jason Kipnis is in a great spot on top of that order. 378 WOBA, 181 ISO for Kipnis. Homered the last time they faced a weak right-handed pitcher. He does have a little bit of pop. He can definitely get multiple hits for you, score a couple runs, maybe knock some in if Rajai Davis is in front of him and getting on base. So I do like that matchup. Francisco Lindor also in a pretty good spot against right-handed pitching. 350 WOBA as a lefty, 163 ISO. Then if you're looking for a long shot play at the bottom of the order, I really like this Tyler McGuinn kid. 398 WOBA, 242 ISO. I mean, those are elite level numbers. He's a left-handed bat that's going to be hitting against a bad right-handed pitcher. So he's somebody that you can look at if you're looking for a flyer. I actually kind of like the idea of stacking like 9-1-2 in the order and getting like McGuinn and Rajai Davis and then Kipnis and Lindor. Maybe even adding in, if you're playing on DraftKings and you can do a 5-person stack, maybe going like 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and adding in, Mike Napoli or Carlos Santana, whoever happens to be in there. Next game we can talk about, we got St. Louis Cardinals against the Kansas City Royals. Adam Wainwright on the mound for the Cardinals. Now, left-handed bats have always been the guys with a little bit of a higher average against them. This year, both left-handed and right-handed bats are hitting him pretty well. And he's, like I said, he struggled, and then he started to look a little bit better. I don't think he's going to get lit up here, but I do think Kansas City can get some runs on him. Eric Hosmer, probably my favorite play. 390 WOBA for him versus right-handed pitching. He's probably the biggest bat that they have on Kansas City against the righty. So I definitely think he's in play. I also like Alex Gordon. Just came back off the DL, I think Friday or Saturday. So it's only his second or third game in there. His price is still pretty cheap, and he's been hitting up in a 2-hole. So if he's going to be hitting up towards the top of that Royals order, he's going to be pretty cheap, and he has his preferred splits matchup. I think Alex Gordon's somebody that we got to look at as well. The way that Wainwright's been pitching this year, I think even some of these right-handed bats could be in play. So if you're stacking them up, I'd look at a guy like Whit Merrifield, right-handed bat, second base, outfield eligible option. And then even a guy like Lorenzo Cain, who had another big day yesterday. Those are going to be the 4 guys at the top of the order for the Royals. And I think all 4 of them make a little bit of sense against Wainwright. On the other side of this game, we got Danny Duffy. Duffy is a left-handed pitcher. He's been pitching really well lately. Right-handed bats do have a higher average and all the home runs against them. I don't think he's given up. He didn't give up a home run yet this year to left-handed bats, and I don't think he gave up one all of last year either. So, left-handed power bats are definitely not the guys you want to take against him. Right-handed bats with a little bit of power make more sense. So a guy like Steven Piscotty, 439 WOBA, 238 ISO score. I like Piscotty a lot. I definitely think he's the one bat that kind of stands out to me on that Cardinals team today. The lefties are not in a good spot. So guys like Carpenter and Adams and Moss are going to be nowhere near my lineups today. Next game we can talk about, we got Toronto at Colorado. So this is going to be a popular one, probably a lot of runs expected here. But I don't know, it's a little bit shady to me because John Gray is actually a pretty good pitcher. He's a guy that induces a lot of ground balls, not a humongous strikeout rate, but, a decent one. His numbers are much better on the road. He is, not as good at home, probably about 50 or 60 batting average point difference, like a 210, 215 on the road, 260, 265 at home. Right-handed bats have a little bit of a higher average against them, even though he's a right-handed pitcher. I don't think he's a pronounced reverse splits kind of guy. So I think the lefties are still in play too. But again, if you're looking at guys righty on that Toronto team, Josh Donaldson and Edwin Encarnacion right at the top stand out to me. Both guys have 380 plus WOBAs. Both guys have 270 plus ISO scores. I mean, that's a lot of power that the two of them have there. Colorado, a very good hitter's ballpark. So I do think those guys at the top of the, Toronto order are in good spots. Michael Saunders, the one left-handed bat they have that's been doing some damage, 364 WOBA, 214 ISO against right-handed pitching. I wouldn't mind including him in there as well. Maybe a mini stack with, guys like Donaldson and Encarnacion and, Saunders. Again, all these bats are going to be pretty popular. People just kind of flock to Coors and stack up this whole game. So I don't think you can get any of these guys low-owned, but there's always a chance the Coors game goes, 10-7 or 9-8, and you get a lot of production from both sides. The other side, we got Marco Estrada, who's actually been really solid, probably the best pitcher on that Blue Jays team this year. 270 ERA, 0.98 whip. Averages about 6 innings with 6 or 7 Ks, gives up very few hits, does walk a few guys. I guess if you're looking to go against him, Cargo and Blackman are the lefties that you would use to attack him. Arenado, really good in righty-on-righty matchup, so he would probably be the right-handed bat. Again, none of these guys are going to be low-owned, but, this is a game that's going to have a high total, although I do kind of like both of these pitchers a little bit, so it should be a lower total game for an average Coors Field game. Next game, we can talk about Philly at Arizona. Robbie Ray on the mound for Arizona. Right-handed bat's the way to go after him. Allowed a 296 average to him with 11 home runs in 57 innings this year. There really aren't a lot of big bats on this Phillies team. I mean, you got Tommy Joseph, who's not a bad option. The kid does have power. Very good numbers so far this year to start his career against, left-handed pitching. He should be somewhere in the middle of the order, so he makes sense. He's probably going to be hitting cleanup. You probably have Cameron Rupp or Carlos Ruiz, most likely Cameron Rupp, the catcher behind them. Rupp's another guy, hits left-handed pitching pretty well, so, makes sense as a catcher option today. And then Maikel Franco, 230 ISO score for him. He's got a lot of power. He has been kind of cold, though. His batting average has dropped. He hasn't been getting a lot of hits lately, but, again, if you're talking about guys that can hit a left-handed pitcher, he's a big right-handed bat. The 3, 4, 5 in the order with Franco, Tommy Joseph, and Cameron Rupp, probably the way you want to go and attack Robbie Ray. Good hitters park there in Arizona as well, so we could see some runs here. On the other side of this game, we got Vincent Velasquez, and Velasquez was lights out earlier in the year before he got hurt. This is his first start back from injury, so I don't know how deep they're going to let him go, but all accounts are that he looks really good. He pitched a bullpen session on Saturday. They said he's good to go today. He had a rehab game, I think, Wednesday or Tuesday. They said he looked really good there. So, when this guy's right, I mean, he was a high strikeout guy, keeping not a lot of hits allowed, not a lot of walks allowed, not a lot of runs allowed. I mean, he's a big prospect that they're expecting to be one of the anchors of this pitching staff for a long time going forward. With that being said, I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, even in righty-on-righty matchups, 399 WOBA, 237 ISO, he makes some sense. You want to attack the righty Velasquez with left-handed bats. So guys like Chris Herman, I think, are in play. The left-handed platoon catching option. He's been having a pretty solid season. You can still look at a guy like Jake Lamb, 357 WOBA, 197 ISO. More of like a kind of like a one-off looking for a home run with a guy like Jake Lamb. Herman's more of the solid cash game play that can get a couple hits and score a couple runs for you. And Goldie is obviously in play anytime you want to, even in righty-on-righty matchups. Next game we can talk about, we got Houston at the Los Angeles Angels. Matt Shoemaker's on the mound, and he's been on fire his last 8 starts. He's basically turned into like a strikeout machine. His last start was actually against the same Houston team. Went 7 innings, gave up 8 hits, 3 runs, and 7 strikeouts. So that's a pretty solid return that he had there. He does have a high fly ball rate, so this is a dangerous Houston team, but it's a lot better for him now than it was last start. His last start, this game was in Houston. This start is in LA. LA is a much tougher place to hit home runs out of than Houston is, so it actually kind of benefits Shoemaker with the park switch. You look at some of these guys on the Houston team, though, there are a couple guys that hit them really well. I mean, Altuve is 6 of 14 lifetime with 2 home runs, so definitely wouldn't mind some exposure to him. Correa, 3 of 9 lifetime, so I don't think that's a bad deal either. Springer actually has some pretty bad numbers against him. So does Marwin Gonzalez, but you would understand that because you actually want lefties against him more than you want righties. So, a guy like Colby Rasmus, Rasmus is actually 5 of 13 lifetime with a home run too. So I think Rasmus is another guy that I look there. Altuve, Correa, Rasmus, probably the 3, 4, 5 batter for this lineup. Those are the 3 guys that I really want to attack Shoemaker with. On the other side of this game, we got Colin McHugh pitching. He was solid last week against the Angels. He went 7 innings, 5 hits, 1 run, and 6 strikeouts. So, he was even better than Shoemaker was actually. Angels really aren't a great team against right-handed pitching. So, I do think that he's in line for another pretty good game. Trout's really the one guy that stands out the most in any matchup, really. 410 WOBA for him, 279 ISO against right-handed pitching. He's 4 of 14 lifetime against McHugh with 3 extra base hits, including a home run. And then the only other guy who had pretty good numbers was Cole Calhoun. Calhoun, the lefty, does make a lot more sense to use against McHugh. 7 of 23 lifetime for him, so that's a 304 batting average. I think he's another guy that that I'd be looking at. Normally it's only Trout, but I think Trout and Calhoun are in play today. And then the last game we have is Oakland against San Francisco. We got Daniel Mengden on the mound for Oakland. Young right-handed pitcher. He has 3 solid starts since coming up to the majors, but his record is 0-3 because he's gotten no run support. And I think the same thing is very likely to happen to him here today. You want to attack him with left-handed bats. So guys like Joe Panic, guys like Brandon Belt, I think are in great spots here. You know, Jared Parker's got a little bit of pop a little bit further down in that lineup, so he's a viable option as well. You know, you can always look at Posey, even though it's righty on righty. He's just a very good, very good hitter, very solid in the middle of that order. You know, one of the better catcher options on any day. Remember, though, San Francisco's more of a pitcher's park than a hitter's park, so I'm not really looking for them to light up Mengden. You know, he's kind of proven that he's, at the very least, a decent pitcher. So while they may get a couple runs off him, I don't really see them lighting him up for 8 to 10. On the other side of this game, we got Jeff Samardzija pitching. Left-handed bat's doing much better against him. He's been very tough on righties. So, you know, I think that means that he's in a pretty good spot here. You look at this Oakland team, you know, you got guys like Coco Crisp, Stephen Vogt, who's probably the best left-handed bat they have, and he's only at like a 340 WOBA. And then the rest of the big bats they have, the 2 biggest bats, probably Danny Valencia and Chris Davis, and they're both right-handed. So with Samardzija being really tough against right-handers, I kind of think this is a pretty good matchup for him. Not really looking to put a lot of Oakland bats into my lineup today, but like I said, the guys that do make sense, the lefties, Vote, maybe, Coco Crisp, but the guys who we like to play every day, who are both pretty good hitters. You know, Davis has some power against right-handed pitching, and Danny Valencia has actually proven that he's a pretty good overall hitter, even against righties. You know, right around the 360 WOBA, 200 ISO for him. You know, Shark being Samardzija being so tough on those right-handed bats, I really can't get myself to use those guys today. So I'm probably staying away from most, if not all, of the Oakland bats. And that pretty much sums it up for our 10-game slate that we have here today for MLB DFS. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.